Dark Scorpion support never ever because God has forsaken me. Anyway, welcome back to the Silver Screen Conference, everyone. As it's custom now, I'm your host, Yugioh. Summoning in attack mode, we have Digimon 11.
Never say that again. Ever.
Jova Hexion.
The Blackluster Soldier of Destiny.
Of course. Now use Reborn the Monster to summon back Jay from the Mystery Dungeon Tingo Gathers Out of a Gate podcast.
What do you mean I can't bring my Ice Barriers deck? It's not like I'm trying to Pendulum Summon.
You have enough structured decks for support already. And lastly, I activate a random monster appears to summon, well, I guess someone who is more accustomed to Deji's channel, Flynn.
The Silver Screen Conference was recorded in front of a live studio audience.
This is a weird synchro summon.
Synchro what? We're not at that movie, technically.
Just to let you know, Flynn operates through Time Wizard rules, so
A coin
old school.
yeah.
I either destroyed the enemy or the entire podcast is going to hell.
Lovely. Speaking of which, today's subject is, well, as foreshadowed last year, a Yu-Gi-Oh movie. But because of the way it's weird worded, I'll just say for now the Japanese name, which is Yugioh Hikari no Piramido. And instead, what's the original, Jova?
Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie! Pyramid of Light!
Basically the same thing.
This is technically the second major OVA that Yu-Gi-Oh got. There was one based on Season 0, which is Red Eyes Black Dragon. But this is a bit complicated because this, if you remember what we mentioned in Pokemon Forever or Celebi and the Voice of the Forest, where 4Kids actually commissioned new footage to literally fill in plot holes and occasionally trying to have quote-unquote fun with Team Rocket, they one-upped that by having an entire OVA commissioned to Toei Animation. I think that's the company who did the anime. But the thing is that the timing was, a bit different from Japan to America. For the West it made sense, because chronologically this takes place between two specific story arcs that around the time we were airing, so it was the perfect fill-in material.
If I remember correctly, I think it was Battle City?
Yes,
it was taking place
right after the end of Battle City and right before the Waking the Dragon arc, aka the Seal of Orichalcos arc. But for Japan, the anime was practically almost over, and instead the GX was about to start, so they just got, by the way, this happened, in the meantime. And speaking of which, instead, because this was a thing that also was tied to a lot of anime movies, because this got a theatrical release, of course. A lot of, movie reviewers that back then went to see it, of course, did not get this, because this is a movie that is not newcomer-friendly at all. So, in the rare chance that, you're not a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, first of all, what are you doing here? Are you a child that actually stumbled in this corner of the internet because your parents were too neglectful to you?
It might just be a Pokemon fan who's so...
Or are you a Minecraft player that actually has stumbled into this as using it as a background while building your house? Because if so, I have a perfect tutorial for you, which involves a lot of buckets with lava and a high place.
You do realize that we're gonna have to do the Minecraft movie eventually, right?
Fuck.
Not it.
My point is, this is not a movie for the newcomers. If you're not a Yu-Gi-Oh fan or only have, passively heard of this movie, this is gonna be very confusing to you in a lot of ways, so we urge you to catch up if you haven't. Minor bonus for those that know me and Jova, our group did comment on this movie, actually made a proper commentary years ago, and I had to admit, it's rough, because back then I was not caught up yet with a lot of both the anime and the card game itself. I kinda had a fallout with Yu-Gi-Oh! At one point, so it was more of a casual viewing, and, it wasn't good. But at the very least, since then I actually bothered to catch up with everything. So
I was familiar with the card game and thankfully enough the anime, since I was a big Yu-Gi-Oh fan. I even stuck to GX, which I love. But yeah, needless to say, that'll probably eventually get a Generations commentary.
The point in all of this is, as mentioned, 4Kids actually bothered to commission Japan specifically, a proper anime of this. They even employed they basically did the writing. Again, it's a game on who did what, because I still find it very weird that the script was written first in America and then Japan was pretty okay to just do their own localization thing, especially because it's also confusing because for the Japanese version there is also extra footage, so I was wondering for a while if it was a case of the entire animation was presented to 4Kids and they recoupled with what they had, but apparently it might not be the case. I have something to say on the matter at the very end, but what you need to know, audience, is that for the main purposes, we're basing things around the version that America wanted, that 4Kids wanted in all of their usual, cut and saw manner. And I'll just mention what are the key differences with what instead Japan got at the very end.
How in God's name was 4Kids able to pull this off?
4Kids accrued a lot of money because they held a lot of the cards there. No pun intended. While Pokemon was the big Mon Hunter game, if you were to compare how popular its trading game was to Yu-Gi-Oh!, Yu-Gi-Oh! Blew it the heck out of the water. Namely because Yu-Gi-Oh! Was a series first and foremost about the card game, which made the trading card game pretty much gel immensely well with it. And as you can imagine, thanks to the influences of that, 4Kids got a lot of say with stuff, which in turn gave them pretty much a nice hot line to the company behind Yu-Gi-Oh!, which gave them the faith to let them commission their own movie, The Pyramid of Light. And while I'm sure there are some things that are more risque in the Japanese version, for a 4Kids product, this one actually gets surprisingly pretty violent.
Again, I will say what I have to, after the recap, but I can tell you that in terms of level of violence or love, in neutral terms, there is nothing really different. The major difference are about pace and, exposition.
This is why another thing to just say with 4Kids is, again, it's easy to think that they were always just wiping stuff out, but no. If anything, they were inconsistent about it. We sometimes had, of course, the removal of guns. Sometimes we kept the guns in. See Sonic X for the crowning version of how inconsistent
Sometimes they were just turned into toys, like with Borderlord Dragon, to the point where the OCG took the piece out of that.
Like, I think, yes, don't get me wrong, when 4Kids died, they were definitely the bad guys, but for a long time, they were just weird.
If there is one thing to perfectly describe 4Kids entertainment, it was that they were consistently inconsistent.
Well said. Without further ado, let's actually take a look
When
at
and
this
where
movie,
are
shall
we?
So we actually start before the beginning of the anime, in a sense. Okay, so you know how the intro of the original show would always talk about, the ancient games and how a boy solved the Millennium Puzzle? Well, we get to see what was happening exactly around the time Yu-Gi-Oh! Solved the puzzle. He kind of unleashed the ultimate evil, which kind of killed some archaeologists who uncovered, behind a sarcophagus, the Pyramid of Light. What's the Pyramid of Light? It is basically a clear crystal version of the Millennium Puzzle.
But it's upside down because it's evil!
Don't you know, anything hanging upside down is evil. You see a bout of toast upside down, that means the devil's there, as toast.
Shut the fuck up!
Damn it, Shyamalan!
Wait, so wouldn't the Millennium Puzzle itself be evil since its whole thing is being upside down?
But that's the thing,
no.
Jay. Remember, Yami is a force of darkness, but he's a good force for darkness.
Also, another
just ignore all the people that he killed in season 0, please.
Real talk. I need to know, how could you imagine if Yu-Gi-Oh! Actually stuck with that original premise?
Okay. Believe it or not, they were originally going to. The main reason it didn't, and why Yami became more of a heroic protagonist, was because the card game was the most popular.
Yeah.
Originally, it was supposed to be all these different death games and whatnot, but people gravitated the most to the trade card game, and well, as a result, the creator kind of had to make it more about the cards.
R.I.P. Kazuki Takahashi.
And since when it comes to the card games, even Yamayuki is more the good guy, that's why Dark Yugi became, well, essentially the heroic pharaoh as opposed to pretty much Jigsaw when you think about it, Jesus Christ.
I mean, to be fair, the people he attacked were just a bunch of people who, beat the shit out of a bunch of 15-year-olds.
Oh,
I'm
that
still
is
creating
true.
Season
They often
0
had
is short enough that he probably deserves a retrospective on his own at one point.
Pretty much.
I'll be
Uh,
there.
but
Imagining a game nearby the volcano where life and death is based off of Parcheesi.
Just a small detail, because this is a thing that is, in the original American version. The whole scene about Yugi putting together the pieces of an alien puzzle was something that was showcased both in the manga and in Season 0, but up until that point, never in Duel Monsters. So this was kind of a first for many people. It's a bit on a very equivalent to how Digimon the movie had the original, pilot, proof of concept, properly shown before the original movie. Except in this case, it's original footage based meant to be a parallel to what the villain of the movie, gets discovered.
If I recall correctly, Pyramid of Light is considered canon to the
Oh
overall
well,
series.
okay. For the purpose
If I
of the
recall
anime,
correctly,
for the
mind you.
purpose of the anime is, but keep in mind that the villain of the movie has never been referenced again. The arc has not really been adapted, as far as I know, in any of the video games. The cards utilized in the appear in this have been actually printed, so that's fair and square. But that's because the OCG and TCG bother to print these days everything that has happened, manga appearance, one event specifically, and in this case, movie-wise. So that's not too much of, referencing other than, just signing a checklist. The point is that for the purpose of the anime, yes, this happened, but the characters just pretended it didn't, especially because the card that Kaiba uses in this, that is basically the key victory to everything in the duel, never gets used again in the Waking the Dragon arc, and even in the final one. So, again, it could be still canon, but let's just say that Kaiba lost a card in the meantime.
Well, yes, unfortunately, several archaeologists are dead, which may or may not be Yuki's fault. What he does activating the puzzle apparently brings back the Shadow Games. Yes, one thing that's never clear, but is apparently made more clear, is that the return of the Shadow Games is apparently on Yugi unleashing the Pharaoh, basically.
Oops.
But not to worry. Well, okay, worry a bit, because holy cow, even Karibo's evil at the start when these dark
As it
spirits
should
try
be.
to pretty much
If
kill
you bother
Yugi.
to actually look at the cards, the Kuribo is supposed to be based around another normal monster called the Wretched Ghost of the Attic. So keep in mind, Kazuki Takashi probably designed the monster originally just to be just another generic little gremlin that would be evil, but because it got popular over time, they had to cutesify it.
Karibo kind of became the Pikachu of dual monsters in terms of being basically the companion monster. So much so that technically he even came back for GX, both literally Karibo and as winged Karibo. But I digress.
Yeah, go on.
While Karibo and friends are about to tear Yugi apart, this is when Yami Yugi comes out and pretty much says, "Hey, cut it out," and basically sends them packing. So, while Yugi technically brought back the Shadow Games, they are put away once more by the Pharaoh, who, unfortunately, while he knows how to do that, later says in the movie that his memories are a little sparse. Probably for the sake of
What's the difference between memory and instinct?
Because plot. It's because plot.
Yeah, but
okay, think of it like a computer. Well, when you erase its memory, it still knows how to function.
Again, it's also shown in the anime that another character connected to the Pharaoh, Shadi, did try to put things back in order, but just couldn't, and told, well, you're on your own. Tough shit.
Pretty much. So anyway, now let us cut to the present after a bit of a time skip, and it turns out that all of Domino City has dueling mania, in that, okay, Yugi has become such a big hotshot that now everyone wants to beat him to get his Egyptian god cards.
Mm-hmm.
We are not quite yet to the point of GX where an entire battleship escort is given to a bunch of rare cards, but here we are, folks. The entire city wants to jump a kid just because he beats Seto Kaiba.
Also,
actually, this is something I do want to point out.
Gone.
I feel like that's a good expansion of what would after Yugi became the king of games. It's like, people want to go after him and fight him.
Also in the montage, small cameos from Mako Tsunami, Rex and Weevil, and My Valentine. Enjoy them because they're just there to tell you that at least 3 of these people will get fucked in the upcoming Waking the Dragon arc.
Also, Deds, let me just say this. No, I love how openly silly this movie is. Like, they do not shy away from just how much cards rule the world, which is honestly part of why I love GX. Like, yes, it is incredibly insane that a dueling academy was made for playing cards, but gosh dang it, they go with it in such earnest detail. But yeah, no, basically a little recap and retelling to let you know that this is after the Battle City tournament, basically. And yes, Yugi is in possession of the 3 Egyptian god cards, which should make everyone trembling, but nope, they think they can beat him as a pipsqueak. Yeah, this was also another thing, since by the time of GX, Yugi was pretty much literally treated as a god by that point. But yeah, no, at this point, everyone wanted a piece of him. Good thing he has his friends to help him escape a literal mob. And hey, even Joey gets to show off his skills as the godfather of duel monsters, as he puts it.
Which involves hilarious shtick like getting actually injected in the ass by injection fair Lily.
Yeah. This was at that point where they were getting more creative with how the duel monsters could interact with duelists, save the
because of hologram shit.
Yeah. You know, that was a weird thing. Half the time it seemed like just holograms. The other half it was like a pseudo shadow game, except the pain was more hilarious instead of, oh my god, it's literally killing me. But to Joey's credit, he does take out a few duelists, like, you know, since, as even he says, Tristan's deck actually sucks even more than his.
Yeah,
so,
after the virtual reality arc, Tristan basically becomes almost pointless until Bakura shows up again.
Pretty much. However, the mob is still not quelled, since while Taya and Yugi peer around a corner, the crowd go into a frenzy and actually run over Joey and Tristan just to get at the kids. Good lord. Thankfully, they have the one place no duelist would ever think to be in, a museum to hide in, where Yugi's grandfather happens to be as well, since he heard news that there is, what else, the Pyramid of Light and an on-mummy at the museum. Okay, now let's back up the plot a little bit, because there's something else going on around the same time. Kaiba has hired an entire laboratory of scientists to host a battle simulation of him supposedly beating Yugi. I don't even want to think about how much money he put into this, but yes, a whole simulation complete with them even jumping on top of the monsters. But no, even with his Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, he can't beat Yugi, who sacrifices Winged Dragon of Ra and Slife of the Sky Dragon to give Obelisk the Tormentor infinity powers. Look, even as something of a Yu-Gi-Oh expert, at least up until XYZ, I never was able to get around even the rules of the official God cards.
For reference, they tried to adapt a lot of the weird, specific multitude of effects that the God cards tend to have in different ways, but they still did. They still had to balance them properly for the OCG and TCG, and right now, as we're doing this, the attempts have been not really successful. The God cards are virtually unusable by now in proper tournaments.
By the way, it's been 3 years since I've watched the original series, and I'm still not over Joey's win getting stolen against Marek.
Pretty much.
Let it go!
I agree with Jay.
He's right.
Jay, the universe will reach its conclusion via the thermal death, and I will still be mad.
Also, Deds, as one of the many people who called out when Ash got robbed in the X and Y anime, you don't have room to talk.
Yeah, well, okay, here's the difference. There's like a nearly 10-year gap between this. This is 20 years ago.
It still hurts.
He was about to win!
Anyway, though, yes, Kaiba as the abridged series puts it, really needs to get laid, since this man has delved so deep into his egotism and the Blue Eyes White Dragon gimmick that he has a fighter jet fashioned after a Blue Eyes White Dragon, and yes, I'm gonna headcanon it, his own theme song playing while he flies the
You're
jet.
Not Me, as it's
essentially.
called. Worth noting, if you forgot, the jet did appear first at the very least at the end of a virtual reality arc, so he probably still borrowed it from there. Also, they actually made it into a proper car later on.
Beautiful. But yes, Kaiba, while he fires the scientists, has found out finally the one true winning formula to beat Yugi, a card that Pegasus happens to have. Yes, Pegasus is in this movie as well, missing an eye, mind you, which, yes, he does expose to creep Kaiba out, but yes, alive, thankfully. But it turns out Pegasus has not one, but two cards. Much to Pegasus's own confusion. So there's this creepy figure going around, kind of appearing in people's dreams, one of which turns out to be Pegasus's dreams. But Pegasus basically chalks it up to him drinking too much white wine before bed.
It's called Chateau Pegasus, I think. It's on brand.
I want to point out something that I noticed when watching this. This is the first fucking note I put down. Is that Pegasus's room consists of a single drawer, an open window, and a single bed. There is like so much open space.
It's because Pegasus was robbed for leaving.
It's about feng shui or something like that, Flynn. I don't know what to tell you.
This is a special island that Pegasus is on. Apparently he's retired from card making to more architecture and all that stuff. But yes, we see a shadowy figure place a card on his deck. As it turns out, there is a shadowy presence who is able to predict the future using the Pyramid of Light. As it turns out, there is a prophecy tied into that. We'll get back to that later after we finish up with Pegasus and Kaiba, but basically, Kaiba comes wanting the card that he knows of from Pegasus. What could that card be? That's a surprise. However, Pegasus is not interested in dueling him. Okay, I will say this. I do love the dialogue on point, which at times feels borderline abridged, but thankfully enough that it still is official, because the characters in this movie have no chill whatsoever. One of which being how Pegasus constantly mocks Kaiba about the fact that at this point it is Kaiba's gimmick to lose to Yugi. And how, he really needs to get a life. And how much of a life does he need? Kaiba actually wagers all three of his Blue Eyes White Dragons if he loses against Pegasus. Now I just want to remind you, Kaiba has threatened to kill himself over one of these card games before. I legit wonder if he had lost this duel and lost those cards, would he have just gone lights out at that?
He's so rich, he probably could have just made some new Blue Eyes anyways.
Yeah.
No. Then he dedicate the rest of his life to making Pegasus's miserable. It's like, okay, Pegasus, I'll duel you once more, and I'm wagering my company.
Yeah, again, it's all about the commitment and how Kaiba feels so strong about his capabilities.
I mean, it also helps that Kaiba in this specific duel beats him without ever having to pull out the blue eyes.
Yes, Kaiba actually does beat Pegasus this time. Once again, Pegasus uses Toon World, which, to be fair, even Kaiba calls him out on, but he does have Kaiba on the ropes. However, with the use of his X, Y, and Z cards to make the XYZ Dragon, no, not the actual XYZ Dragon made from the XYZ Summon era, I mean the original XYZ Dragon.
That's because the summoning mechanic is labeled as XYZ instead. It's slight different pronunciation, Jova.
And also, isn't that one called Astral Dragon?
Ugh. Pick your pick. If anything, what I can add to this is that, once again, the anime makes a big fuss about, Kaiba making the super ultra combo when he could have just used MST to destroy Toon World. It's literally the same thing.
You're a fucking nerd.
Oh, I'm sorry. Again, okay, maybe I'm just, too pedantic. It's not like the movie itself will actually have a character use MST later. Oh, wait!
Yeah. Like, to Tio's credit, we literally see Mystic Space Typhoon used later, and I'm pretty sure, doesn't Kaiba have Heavy Storm as well in the deck?
Again,
Yeah,
I guess you can make an argument with its interpretation of, working with the resources that you have, but it's more about, theatricality over actual practicality.
I mean, okay, to Kaiba's credit, we can always just chalk it up to he didn't get that card in the draw, so he had to improvise. Not everyone can be Yugi, who has the heart of the cards on their side.
I have an alternative explanation.
What?
Kaiba had Heavy Storm, but he was destroying it because he wanted to send a message.
Of course.
Which, to be fair, given that it is Pegasus and all Pegasus is done, I could totally see Kaiba.
It's also really Kaiba, so it's like vanity versus a hater. Tio, as a professional hater, should you understand the mentality?
Okay. Let's just remember, guys, this is Kaiba who's better after the Mind Crush. Imagine evil Kaiba before the Mind Crush, and now he would have done this.
Even post Mind Crush, Kaiba is one of those people who I like to dub a hater on payroll.
And the only reason, it's still not treated as a complete bad guy is because his adoptive father, Gozaburo, was somehow even worse.
Kaiba's a hater on payroll. He's working double overtime.
Kaiba defeats Pegasus, and thus takes the card, only to discover that there are two cards. Okay, I assume this is Kaiba going off of analysis of the cards, because do not be alarmed, English viewers. For the first time ever, the writing on the text shows up in the English version of the anime.
The entire point is of this duel was, as mentioned, that Kaiba is convinced that Pegasus has made a failsafe card specifically to contrast the god cards. The thing is that Kaiba takes two cards. As we will learn later, both of these cards can actually go, perfectly good against the god cards. So Kaiba just assumes that both of them were made, and Pegasus was just underselling him. But even when Pegasus tells him, no, I only made once, I don't know why there are two, Kaiba is like, yeah, lol, bye.
Nice try, you snake.
So anyway, back at the museum, Yugi and Taya are with Yugi's grandfather, where they see a corpse that is labeled the Mummy of Anubis. Yes, that Anubis. Okay, Anubis is weird in how he's portrayed in Egyptian mythology. Some portray him as just, a nice god, ironically. Some portray him as a neutral god. He also does have a tendency to be a villain. Guess which one this is.
For the purpose of this, however, Anubis is not to be treated as a god, but like a powerful sorcerer.
Okay, so there is a foreboding prophecy regarding Anubis that reads, "The eye that sees what's yet to come, its vision shall be fulfilled, unless blinded by events predetermined, thus light and shadows both be killed." Very foreboding, especially since around that time, the Free get flashed by the Mummy. Yes.
Oh, gross! There's like children here!
Given that Anubis later shows up naked, he literally was flashing them, good lord. But yes, when they come to, the glass is shattered, the whole mummy is missing, as is the Pyramid of Light, which was also on display. Which, as you can imagine, is not good. Yugi, realizing also that Kaiba may be being used once again, goes off to warn Kaiba, but hey, convenience sake alive, Kaiba sent Mokuba to fetch Yugi. Literally has him stop by his house just to pick up his dual disc and deck because, once again, Kaiba is ready to bring Yugi down to his knees in a children's trading card game to show that he is the true Big Dick Chad of the world.
There's going to be a part later in this movie that I'm going to run back to about this bit. About how Kaiba is such a petty bitch.
Look. I wish I could do it justice how funny and on point the dialogue is, but if I were to point out every cool line in this movie, we'd be here much longer than we need to be. The point is, Yugi leaves Taya with his grandfather and goes out to duel Kaiba once again. Joey and Tristan, catching note of Yugi leaving for the Dual Dome, once again made by Kaiba.
Biodome.
Okay, you know what? Honestly, I'm not surprised. Let's not forget Kaiba is the one who made the Dual Academy.
If anything, I'm surprised that the entrance is not shaped like a Blue Eyes mouth.
Oh, remember, he also technically helped make the dual disc.
Yeah, the technology.
His own contribution to society.
Again, also worth noting is that for comedy purpose, Joy and Tristan managed to catch, the actual limo that, Mokuba had invited Yugi in on foot, because I guess, they're just that hilarious.
And just in the nick of time, because after they enter the building, Kaiba, to make absolutely certain that Yugi can't run out of the duel, seals all the exits. Like this is Kaiba from the manga when he put them through that saw death trap.
I'm pretty sure this is illegal in some way.
Oh, you mean the one where he crushed Tristan? That was funny.
Oh, let's see. Crushed Tristan with cubes, chased after them with a serial killer, the taser incident, nearly had them shot by marksmen and all that. Yeah. Kaiba had some issues before.
Worth noting that in these movies there are, because of some lighting effects, at some points Kaiba's hair starts to glow green in minor places. It's subtle, but you can notice that.
Beautiful. But yes, Kaiba is like, no one gets out of here alive until this duel is over. Christ on a bicycle. So, yeah, it's duel time. And
that means for the rest of the movie, practically. Yeah,
pretty much.
2/3 of the movie are basically just Seto and Yami. A duel, sure.
We're sorry to say that the Yu-Gi-Oh movie is 2/3 of just some dudes playing Yu-Gi-Oh!
It is worth noting that there is stuff in between, probably in order to not have the pace being too monotonous by having two people just standing and yelling at each other all the time, but still.
So the funny thing is, the duel practically starts with all Egyptian god cards out, partly due to Kaiba's own machinations. Mm-hmm. He wants the Egyptian god cards out so he can activate a trap card, the Pyramid of Light, which, as per the movie, has the specific effect to remove the Egyptian god cards from play. Not just to the graveyard, but remove from the game.
For modern player, that means banish, in case you need to know.
Mm-hmm. But
okay,
yeah,
those from effects. Oh no, this is early Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah, so that is actually semi-dangerous in early Yu-Gi-Oh! This is before you could just sort of hand-wave banishment like a fucking red card in soccer.
Admittedly, even in the old days, there were some cards to fight against.
One case is what Kaiba demonstrated
rare.
that in his duel with Pegasus, and it's gonna be play a part for the climax, believe it or not. So,
well, yeah, Chekhov's gun.
But yes, Kaiba activates the Pyramid of Light, which not only removes the Egyptian god cards from play, but envelops the duel within a literal Pyramid of Light.
I would like to point out that Kaiba does not know the effects of the card, so this should actually freak him out, but he's just like, neat, because he's still operating on the Umineko school of, the occult does not exist and Yugi is just a bunch of hocus pocus stuff.
Yeah, I put down that if Kaiba got a hand on the Seal of Orichalcos in the later arc, he would definitely use it against Yugi.
I always found it a missed opportunity. We never saw Kaiba get possessed by a Millennium item that contained the soul of his ancestor.
That's because his rod was given instead to Shadi, so...
yeah.
We get to see Joey dressed up in Henshin outfits, so you know what? I'm satisfied.
But yeah, basically, when the Pyramid of Light activates, not only does it have an effect on the game, it has an effect on the real world. Those who look into its red eye have, their soul taken. Joey and Tristan are sucked in via their souls, while their physical bodies are left on the scaffolding. Whereas, because Yami Yugi and Yugi share a body, it's regular Yugi that's sucked into, of all things, the Millennium Puzzle. Why? Well, it turns out that within the Millennium Puzzle, there is an illusion of the Millennium Puzzle fighting the Pyramid of Light, and the Pyramid of Light is breaking into it. Yugi is led by a vision of the Pharaoh to a room with what appears to be a mummy, and several other dead corpses that get up to attack Yugi, forcing him to run. It turns out that mummy within is actually Anubis himself. Yes, somehow the mummy on the Pyramid of Light escaped from the museum and got into the Millennium Puzzle. As you do.
Like you do.
I can't get over the idea of Yugi, who usually sits in the Millennium Puzzle whenever Atem is dueling, getting pulled out of the Millennium Puzzle only to get sucked back into the Millennium Puzzle. Like,
okay, technically he doesn't get sucked into the puzzle when he and Yami switch places. It's more so he recedes deeper into his... kind of into his consciousness and all that.
style, basically.
No, yeah, I get it. I'm familiar with the concept.
But yeah, basically, Pharaoh is kind of freaked out by this, since I think even he isn't entirely sure what it's like inside the Millennium Puzzle, essentially, so he has no idea what's going on with Yugi. And what's worse, the game starts to feel more like a shadow game, because Kaiba summons a dark clown. Not the one you're probably thinking of that he used for Card Crush in the Duelist Kingdom arc, but no, he has it attack Yugi directly, and
stab from
there's
the
no
back.
other way to put it. It literally stabs right through him, and they actually show it. Sure, it's darkened, but still, damn, by 4Kid standards, that's like M rating stuff.
I want to point out, one of my notes I have for this is, quote, somebody must have fucking loved this clown on the writing team.
Yeah, it's actually, that's the thing, Flynn, it's one of the new cards made specifically for this anime, and as such, they needed to promote the shit out of it.
It's sort of similar to the Card Crush virus trap Kaiba played, only this time it's something called Deck Destruction Virus, which, believe it or not, does have a different ability. For every time that the monster tied to it is destroyed, Kaiba can delete 10 cards from Yugi's deck. For those familiar with the game, you will know that once you run out of cards in your deck and have absolutely nothing else you can play, that's an automatic loss. So Yugi's got depleting cards along with Kaiba putting on the absolute heat against him as they trade blows with their sorcerers, dragons, and whatnot, which of course culminates with, what else? Kaiba bringing out the Blue Eyes White Dragon, only to later enhance it into the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. Thankfully, though, Yugi is prepared for this, as he also uses the Dark Magician and Dark Magician Girl to bring out these,
He summons Sorcerer of Dark Magic, yes, because of
that's the one,
conditions.
yeah.
Okay, I was wrong.
Because if I recall correctly, Magician of Dark Magic is also a different card, but yes, Sorcerer...
No, that's the Magician of...
Dark Magician has a lot of support, in case you need to know.
Yeah. The only card deck that has more support than Dark Magician is Blue Eyes, and that's just because holy shit.
And that's for the classic one. Blackwing is just on another level.
For all deck out playstyles, imagine running up against a fiber jar and just realizing you have to start over again.
LOL!
But yes, no, Yugi actually manages to turn the tables for a bit of time and destroys the Ultimate Dragon using the Sorcerer of Dark Magic special ability with 3 Magician cards in the graveyard, reducing its attack points, allowing him to destroy it. But, in spite of the fact that the game is causing both Kaiba and Yugi shadow game levels of pain as it's drawing out not just damage to their bodies, but their literal life force, Kaiba insists that no, he has to beat Yugi here and there while the cameras
Till last
are rolling.
I grapple with thee. For hate's sake, I speed my last breath on thee.
Kaiba would be willing to watch the world burn if it meant he beat Yugi in a duel.
Okay, to Kaiba's credit, I do think that was more so him just believing Yugi was trying to fool him into stopping the game, though that does make me wonder, if Yugi had just gone, fine, I surrender, and ended the duel there.
It's one line of dialogue, and I think it's in both versions, but at least I distinctly remember, Kaiba doesn't want Yugi to surrender, he wants to beat him completely, as he mentions.
But I do have to wonder, like, if Yugi had just, officially ended the game right there and then, would that have screwed with Anubis's plans, given how it did kind of rely on them
Okay,
dueling each other to death?
that I do not know, but I'll have to talk about that when we get to the differences. Go on.
But yes, Kaiba does want that proper victory. And it may come to that. Meanwhile, once again, this time, Pegasus arrives to help out, as Taya and Yugi's grandfather have shown up at the Dual Dome, since, thanks to the Pyramid of Light, the dome has been wrecked so that they're able to enter, and see that it's a Pyramid of Light. However, the Pyramid of Light is getting stronger and causes more debris to fall, nearly crushing them.
Mokuba did manage to get away in time, in case you need to know. That's why he wasn't sucked in.
That there was a line that caught my attention for the dumbest reason possible, and it was Solomon talking about, oh, this thing is giving off so much energy, it's making my pacemaker go haywire, and I was like, he has one of those?
Pegasus comes to their rescue with a helicopter and everything. See, it turns out he found out about the cruel and dark powers of the Pyramid of Light by looking it up. No, he literally says he looked it up.
By the power of 1990s Google.
Early
Okay,
Wikipedia be like.
So Taya notices the Pyramid of Light's glow here and is drawn to it. Now, the abridged version pretty much makes it that she willingly jumps to sacrifice herself for friendship. That is surprisingly not too off here. Now, she doesn't jump since, of course, her body goes limp before, but her soul sure jumps in and does what I can only describe as what looks like an orgasm pose as she shouts to her friends, "I'm coming."
Cyberpunk noise here, I guess.
Anyway, this is around the time Yugi has realized he needs to do something about the Pyramid of Light or the Pharaoh's going to lose. Which is when he goes back, essentially, to the room where the zombies originally accosted him. Thankfully, Taya arrives just in time. And while
with
the
a
villain...
motherfucking spin kick.
Well, hold on, Joe, but before that you have to mention the new monster that Kaiba has to summon.
Yes. For Kaiba's true coup de grace, this is, ironically, the actual card he was going for before he found out about the Pyramid of Light, which, it turns out, was added to Pegasus's deck by the true villain. This card, which he summons by sacrificing Bloy's Ultimate Dragon, which he brought back with Monster Reborn, is a Blue Eyes, a Shining Dragon.
So, fun fact, like a lot of movies that were made from 4Kids and stuff at the time, in America, this is a card that was actually given out to people who went to see the movie in theaters. You'd go to the theater, and they would give you a Blue Eyes Shining Dragon. You could not use this card until 2008.
I was about to say, because for reason that escaped me, the TCG had not printed at that point Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, which is the one requirement you can summon. So, for 4 years, the card that was made for a movie specifically designed, for the Western market, could not actually be properly used in official duels and was just glorified for collecting. Overall, as usual, outstanding card design from the TCG.
Masterful gambit, sir.
I guess that really was to test the patience and loyalty of anyone who held on to that card.
Don't remember if Kevin Tuarto was yet at the TCG by that point, but if he was, I wouldn't be too surprised.
So what makes Shining Dragon so awesome that it could have beaten the Egyptian god cards? Well, believe it or not, essentially, it can in fact target just about any card to be destroyed for the movie. If I recall correctly, it has a similar effect in the official trading card game.
If I recall correctly, it's just like, not Omni-Negate, but something close to that.
It's basically, it's Stardust Dragon, but specifically for it. No effects can target this monster directly, and it gets 300 boost for each dragon in the graveyard.
Yes, essentially. Which makes it Kaiba's trump card to basically wipe Yugi out once and for all. However, and believe it or not, this is more so on Kaiba. Kaiba doesn't want to simply beat Yugi just anyway. Oh, no. He wants to beat Yugi in the most fitting way possible, with Yugi's own Egyptian god cards. But wait, how is that? They're removed from play in its old school Yu-Gi-Oh! He would either need a very rare card or a very specific strategy. Well, his plan is to use Blue-Eye Shining Dragon to destroy the Pyramid of Light, which will then later give him an opportunity to bring Yugi's Egyptian God cards back to fight for him. However, while Kaiba goes to the evil overlord school, it turns out that the true main villain read the evil overlord list and does not want something that convoluted to potentially wreck with his plans.
Worth noting is that Kaiba at this very point, starts speaking in, you can kind of hear Anubi's voice, talking at the same time as Kaiba. However, it's worth noting that Kaiba is clearly, ignoring this, despite the fact that Yami recognizes that he might be possessed, This is not a factor important here, but I will have to mention it later again.
But yes, it's time for us to enter the part where the movie goes full on Kingdom Hearts, because
The last 50 minutes, by the way.
From Kaiba's shadow erupts a murky dog-like creature which morphs into a giant muscle-bound naked man whose naughty bits are thankfully censored by Shadow.
Yeah, again, I think Kazuki Takahashi
Look
designed...
out! There's a naked man behind you.
I think Kazuki Takahashi designed the character of Anubis, but I'm sorry, even if that was the case, his design looks so generic.
Basically, Anubis is a giant muscle man who has a stunning lock of hair and all that, to the point where it would not look out of place in Dragon Ball. So yes, Anubis reveals himself with his plans to bring an eternity of darkness and destruction to the world. He even showcases a future of tanks trying to fight against his monsters, but to no avail, because the military is no match for the power of a children's trading card game.
Which instead in the future will be no match for a different children's trading card game, specifically the Mech Lords, but that's a story for 5Ds.
I mean, granted, in the defense of this is a children's card game powered by essentially the devil.
At this point in time, is the creator a card that's accessible in the Yu-Gi-Oh world?
Sorry?
There is the creator god of
For those
light.
of you who don't know, there is one card above the 3 Egyptian god cards known as, it was something...
Creator god of light, Hikarati.
Isn't she from the manga, though, I think?
She's from the manga version of the final arc where Yami Bakura sends everybody back in time.
That sounds about right.
He is how the Pharaoh defeats Zork in the manga, I think.
Essentially, what we have going here is the true final battle as Kaiba is tossed aside along with his pride. As now it's Anubis versus Yugi. And, okay, this match is already illegal since Anubis steps in with a whole new deck while Yugi has barely any cards left, essentially.
This is the same series where later on a man would literally just summon himself, so...
By the way, if Anubis was just gonna come in and cheat with the whole deck, he might as well have reset his life points back to 4,000 instead of keeping it 21.
I mean, yeah, for the purpose of the duel, it wouldn't even matter, so you're completely right, Jay.
Look, he just wants it to be like, no, I'll play by your rules, except for this one thing.
Especially because, okay, the 4Kids dub does not really make much of a mentioning, but Anubis is treating the Shadow game in the old Egyptian way, more like of a ritual rather than an actual, sport.
Yeah, old schools play that way, essentially. But yes, basically, he brings with him Sphinx monsters, basically. These are also cards in the trading card game, and if I recall correctly,
they got
these actually
printed,
were illegal.
promoted and printed, but they suck. It's, again, the entire problem with Pyramid of Light related card is that, wow, these things are impressive. Single MST, boom, your field is gone, bye.
Yeah, so again, while Yami Yugi is unfortunately on the ropes with Anubis, Yugi realizes the meaning of the prophecy to blind the eye, which happens to be in the sarcophagus room. So he pulls the knife from Anubis's coffin, which is now empty, and throws it against the eye. It apparently does nothing, until apparently it turns out that throw had enough power to crack the eye.
Well, that's because he missed. The shot is clearly framed like Yugi. He wants to hit the red gemstone of the eye, but he misses by an inch and hits the stone. So everyone is like, "Oh, you missed!" And then the stone cracks, however, on its own.
I mean, realistically, considering how weak the mummies are, even if he didn't crack it with that, there's nothing stopping him from going, picking up the dagger, and chucking it again.
To be fair, the mummies kind of were shown to be, resilient. Like, no matter how much they kicked and broke them, they kept coming. But yeah, no, that was enough. Now, while it doesn't destroy the Pyramid of Light, this time it does make it vulnerable, since the first time Kaiba tried to use Blue Eyes White Shining Dragon's self-destruct ability to take the Pyramid of Light out with it, it did not work, because Anubis pretty much vetoed that. Now, with the jewel cracked, they're able to destroy the Pyramid of Light, and along with it, the Sphinx monsters. But, unfortunately, Anubis was prepared for this, as he resummons the Sphinx monsters, but fused together as... God, I forget
I think Teleia, the Great Sphinx, is worth noting that in Japanese, not just for the movie, but even for the card itself, this monster is called Androgynous Sphinx. Even if it doesn't really have anything to justify that name.
Yes, so once again it looks like Yugi is in a tight spot, since that's a giant mega monster about to attack his life points directly. And what's worse, he is down to literally no cards in the deck and one card face down left to use. However, he did overhear a part of Kaiba's plan to beat him properly. He surmises that someone as egotistical as Kaiba would want to beat him with his own Egyptian god cards, which means Kaiba must have a card that uses it. And through a sequence of moves, he's able to gain control of that card, which allows him...
Using reverse the reverse, basically. Essentially, if that's the only card on his field, you can actually activate a set card from the opponent's field for your benefit, like as if you're activating on your own.
So in addition to using Monster Reborn to bring Blue Eyes White Shining Dragon to his side to have destroyed the Pyramid of Light, he can now use Kaiba's card, which allows him to bring back the Egyptian god cards, since he has returned from the different dimension.
Yeah.
This was that rare card in mind that I mentioned back in the day that was allowed to help bring back monsters.
And that Kaiba did use already against Pegasus, so there was foreshadowing.
So yes, Yugi brings back the Egyptian god cards and they wipe the floor with Anubis, once and for all destroying even his physical body.
But it's not over yet.
Wait, he didn't hear no bell. So while Yugi and friends are freed from the Millennium Puzzle and return to their physical bodies, Anubis reveals, okay, it's time to go old school. What do I mean by old school? Welcome to OG Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. Well, okay, technically not Season 0, but welcome to the Duelist Kingdom arc of the cards, where you could just do whatever. Anubis basically turns himself into a giant winged dog monster that's able to throw cards that have effects in the real world outside the game. So
by the
basically,
way, to Beast Anubis for revealing that Yugi was just a fucking cheater. He throws Fallout and Inferno Tempest, and if you've seen enough of the original Yu-Gi-Oh, you'll know that every now and again they'll have animation or just
errors,
issues. In this case, when he gets hit with Fallout and Inferno Tempest and guards, there are 2 copies of the Winged Dragon of Ra that fly out of his deck.
Well, I hope somebody got fired from that blunder.
But yes, no.
Part of the cards say no shit to cheating.
Now, Joey tries by throwing 2 very weak monsters. Like, seriously, Joey, this is a bit where the rules don't matter. Throw your red eyes at
broken in his own right back then, when it came to the actual card game, but not for the purpose of this use.
Yeah, basically, just throw out cards at random. While they tell the others to get to safety, Kaiba and Yugi face down Anubis, but Kaiba, granting Yugi the usage of the Blue Eyes White Shining Dragon
That's also
to
because
finally...
Kaiba has his arm injured. He literally cannot do it himself.
The one body part you need to play a card game and it gets into.
Come on, Kaiba, use your feet.
Use your lips.
Get those grippers out.
But
Or be like, Mokuba, come here.
Throw the card for me.
Sorry, Dej, this movie has no idea what to do to Mokuba.
Just like the actual show.
Damn. God, Jordan, where the old stretch.
I actually like Mokuba, so that hurts.
But yes, with the usage of Blue Eyes White Shining Dragon, Yu-Gi-Oh! Destroys Anubis once and for all, also destroying the red jewel from the Pyramid of Light, which finally puts him to rest. And they're certain about it, like, even Pegasus is like, nah dog, he is not coming back from that kind of attack. Now, it might seem like foreshadowing that he can come back, but,
No.
he never came back.
And if anything,
Don't worry, we're just explaining why this movie doesn't need to be acknowledged in the greater canon.
And if anything, the movie kind of ends with everyone basically saying, let us never speak of this again.
But hey, then we get the awesome song One Card Short. Where, yes, for the credits, they suddenly decide, hey, you know all those other moments we didn't throw in songs? Let's just throw in every song we can now.
Also, worth noting is that Kaiba still a sourpuss at the very till the end, and he literally tells the other characters in their faces, spare me your bull about friendship.
I love it. He goes, look, we all know that if things had gone according to my plan, I would have won. Yeah, except Kaiba, you were using, like, even by the standards of the anime, pretty illegal cards.
Whatever,
So-
man.
Yeah,
Movie-
but you
Screw the rules, I have money.
Movie's over, technically. So what happened in the Japanese version? Okay, as I'll put on a general statement, the fact that the dialogue in general is less quippy, less, on the ironic side, and more onto having, even when it comes to having character insult each other in a more elegant kind of way, which, if I recall correctly, reflected the actual way the characters behaved, in the original Japanese anime. For give just one example, during one sequence, the first time Yugi is trapped inside the puzzle and he sees the mummies, he literally runs away, stumbles into Joy and Tristan and says, run away because we are mummies! And when they see them and start away, because they couldn't just resist, Tristan literally says zoinks, because of course.
Thanks, Zoink Scoob.
And like
Also-
stuff like that is not there. And there are a lot of moments where, while in the original, in this case, American version, there would be narration or a character speaking, from outside the camera, as it's custom to give some kind of exposition. Instead, the Japanese version tries to have the scene set in without having to over-explain things. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't actually explain anything, and it's hard to comprehend. If anything, it tries its best to instead actually explain better Anubi's motivation. Because first of all, Anubi's name is not even told until he reveals himself to Yami far later into the movie. It's kept just as a mummy, but it's kept as a mystery on who he is. It was just a mention at the very beginning. The beginning narration is still the same about how the duels were considered rituals in order to grant, riches, eternal life, and status, So they were viewed in the Egyptian civilization as a big thing. But there's also the fact that, I think we didn't mention in the recap, before his reveal, almost, not all the time, but almost all the time Anubis is on screen, the mummy, he chants in what's supposed to be Egyptian, but I'm pretty confident it's just gibberish, because I don't know how much research 4Kids did in the actual Egyptian language. It's a generic chant that virtually means nothing. In the Japanese version, they actually have him basically state his actual motivation. The reason he needed the specific setting of Kaiba and Yami dueling is because he views himself as a ruler of destruction that will need to be awakened when a ruler of light and one of darkness will clash against each other. It's a theme that is present also in the original version, but it's way downplayed and also potentially glossed over because some stuff is still there. When Yugi is in the Millennium Puzzle, he notices flows of cyan energy that flow, but eventually converge into the corpse of Anubis. That's the life force of Yami and Kaiba that gets instead sucked literally back into giving life to Anubis. No,
I noticed that there's like 13 minutes of extra footage apparently in the Japanese version.
It's stuff that instead of actually being big scenes, it's small micro stuff sprinkled throughout that just extend scenes. For instance, one important thing, Grandpa knows about all of this shit in the Japanese version. I think it's because it's to be more in line with the canon of the Japanese version, where the Grandpa was, revealed eventually to be a reincarnation or descendant, I forgot, of the Pharaoh's, court magician, basically. The blue guy.
Right.
Yeah.
What?
While in the fourth...
Yeah, okay.
Wait, what?
So 3 of Atem's old, some of his oldest, closest people are what become the Dark Magician Girl, and the Court Magician, which is just Sugoroku.
Yeah.
It is just
Or
Yugi's grandpa.
Solomon.
Yeah, that's his English name.
Really?
While instead, for the 4Kids dub, Grandpa is clueless for the most part. If anything, he doesn't really have much to do. But instead, in the Japanese version, the Grandpa is actually there to help a bit with the exposition. First of all, the beginning sequence, which doesn't even have a montage, but instead is the character speaking, includes scenes of the Grandpa feeling sorry that Yugi actually managed to solve the puzzle. Also, hilariously, keeping that from the manga, Yugi's entire way of summoning accidentally, the fair Yami spirit, is literally says, I heard that finishing this puzzle grants you a wish, so I do want a friend, that I can talk with and confide myself with. Well...
Wait, is that not in the dub?
No, in the dub, Yugi is just like, oh, cool, I finished, I can't wait to, to actually brag this about with the others.
Wow, that's kind of sorrowing. I've watched all of the series, the next series.
I'll have a summation about these things, to conclude. But again, just to mention, for example, the Grandpa knows a lot about this stuff. Not everything, so he cannot just guess what the plot goes, but it does help put things into perspective. This is important because in the museum sequence, Thea is also present, which later on, when she learns the extra stuff as a confirmation about Kaiba, her willing to jump, and giving away her soul into the Pyramid of Life is intentional because there's an extra scene added where a spirit not only communicates with Yugi and Tristan enjoying inside the chamber of Anubis, but also inside the Pyramid of Life during the duel, where she talks with Yami, which at that point is on the ground unconscious because he only has 200 life points left from an attack, and she tells him the fact that there's an evil force going on, and this is what prompts Yami to tell Kaiba to stop. There's a bit more logic behind that, but it gets even better because in the Japanese version, Kaiba, instead of actually speaking in unison with Anubis, and eventually just ignoring that happening, he starts hearing his voice. He basically just ignores it in the beginning, but as he becomes more pressing, he gets distraught. There's even a sequence where he holds his head, and says basically, get out of my head, and this gives Yami the ultimate confirmation in telling him to stop. And his desire to destroy the Pyramid of Light does not come from arrogance about saying, oh, this was my strategy all along, but to say, fine, I'm gonna prove my point that I can beat Yugi even without this card, basically. So there's a clear...
I'm kind of mixed on that one.
Well,
I don't know
that's
how
the
to
thing,
say.
Dej, because again, despite the Kaiba's arrogance is more, again, complete one, not just, the extra mile of Kaiba's arrogance. That's more of a 4Kids stuff. In both the original anime and in this movie, Kaiba still has a bit of a nuance to his character, and it's also served to showcase the in this case that that's the breaking point, that things are getting serious, So at the very least there is that, but again, it gets even crazier. The only other major note that I have that is worth mentioning is that Anubis' Japanese voice actor occasionally has a very weird laughter. there is that.
It's probably intentional.
Also, the whole prophecy with the dagger and blinding an eye, Drova, that's not in the Japanese version for some reason. So at the critical moment,
Ah,
what Yugi tossing the dagger, to blind the eye is still a thing, but it basically just a spur of a moment thing, and he says, "Oh, that must be where the evil energy is coming from. I need to get something to throw at it." And then he remembers that back in the museum there was a dagger inside, the sarcophagus, so he goes getting that. It's more just a tool instead of actually being part of a prophecy. And also the hit the stone around, not the crystal, is treated less comedically. It's not, it doesn't have the character saying, "Oh, you beast." But here's the final one that I want to mention. That is the cherry on top. At the very end, after Anubis' death and the characters are talking with each other, Kaiba still basically is a sour bitch about it, but he actually congratulates with Yugi, and he says, "Well, I guess you still are the king of games for now."
Yep.
Sure, it's still a backhand compliment at the end of the day, but it's way
It's-
more generous.
A similar thing actually happens at when he visits Joey in the ER. In the Japanese version, he's congratulating him, and it's sincere.
Yeah, no.
So it's just
Like I said,
it's
it's
weird.
just to showcase that the character of Kaiba does have a bit of nuisance, while instead for kids, not for lack of a better term, flounderizing for, hilarity more than anything. Again, the end result is still hilarious, but I can kind of see. However, that is basically the general gist of it. There are a lot of more micro stuff sprinkled right. Like I said, as a general thought, the dialogue is, less prone to say stupid shit and more about, even when the characters are insulting each other. Like, for example, Kaiba, there is a moment where Kaiba, tells a bunch of scientists that they're fired for their blunder. That is still also in the Japanese version, with Kaiba being pissed off and telling them they're fired. But instead of saying something snappy or quippy, I say, "Oh, I guess you need to, confabulate," something, a term that they used before, to get a new job. Instead, he basically said something like, "You had enough time to do it, now get out of my sight." Something that, is less flamboyant, still gets on the point, but, you get what I mean.
There, you can tell that this will be made for an American audience initially, because when the scene where Joey is challenging those, I was about to call them trainers. I'm so sorry.
Well, that's the thing.
Oh,
That's the
gosh.
thing, Daji. Even the recaps of the wiki does not give the character, names. And the first
Yeah.
one they do is called Unidentified Man, and the second Boy. So
Yeah, regardless, the duelist, that face he makes, it doesn't make sense in Japanese.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's talking to them with sincerity. Well, the Japanese like, I'm the father of God.
I'm the godfather of games.
Yeah.
In-
Another thing is that scene where Yugi and the Atame are talking to each other in their spirit realm, decides like with their duel. If you watch it again, you can tell in the Japanese version. Oh, he finished his sentence in the voice of the dub before his mouth closed.
Yeah, for some reason, apparently there is some weird lip sync, which again, it just adds more confusing layers to the whole thing. Which leads me to my final point. I have to kind of say that the Japanese version does improve significantly on the product, and I don't mean just in terms of the voice acting or quality of dialogue, although that is definitely a point. It actually makes the pace much more bearable, because one thing that I didn't really talk about that much is, editing wise, a couple of the scenes are slightly rearranged, so the movie has a bit more time to breathe, basically. And knowing better the motivation of the villain probably helps that too. It's just that the movie at its core, it's still not, something that is considerable groundbreaking. Even for the first official movie based around dual monsters, it's just, not a complete good look at that. So, and again, there's the other factor. Again, assuming what I said at the beginning, that this was completely made by an English American, proper development team, and Toei just provided the animation for the product, and then it was eventually translated in Japanese and everything. That just, again, on one hand, while it would be hilarious to see 4 kids receiving a taste of their own medicine by having a product in a foreign version of their own product actually being better than what they did, would be hilarious. But in all consciousness, it still goes against my principle about, vision of the author and everything. Yes, it is, like you just said, it is true that the 4 kids version, is a complete, potential mess that can be enjoyed potentially only ironically. But at the end of the day, that's what they wanted to do. The writer should be retained culpable because of that. And thanks to the internet these days, we get to know. The movie has even received like a Blu-ray in 2018, 2019, coinciding with the release of V-Rains, basically. So it's still relatively accessible these days. And if I recall correctly, the Blu-ray should contain both versions, I think. So at the very least, the people get to know have a way of deciding the version we prefer and everything. But for the purpose of the mid-2000, Japan basically got a more, better treatment of something that, was done in a foreign country. And sure, you can make an argument that it should not even care because, again, it was a postscript stuff about something that happened in the middle of between 2 arcs that had already passed and was not of much consequence more than anything. But at the end of the day, I still think a better job could have been done overall. It's just not a good look in terms of, relationship between the 2 countries. I would elaborate more in my final thoughts, but that's pretty much it.
This is where I get to drop my take.
Go on, Dej, sorry.
Before we go into our segments.
Nuclear truth bomb incoming.
Blue Eye Shiny Dragon was a card when I first saw it as a kid. It's like, oh my god, this is cool! But now I'm an adult and I see it's like, wow, this does not look out of place of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX.
Let me put
Trust
it like
me,
this.
I said to Tio earlier, it looks like it belongs in the Elemental Heroes deck. But he said, no, Cyber Dragon's like, right.
Not to mention
Reggie,
that.
how did you forget Elemental Heroes?
Again, just cutting a break, Flynn. If anything, it's more hilarious that because trust me, if you've seen the average Link monster done for V-Rains, you will have a heart attack. The average of that is a generic robot dragon, and they're just so unpleasant to look at, and they're also very annoying to play against. So
when Stingray continues his thing of Link monsters don't really scare me.
Usual reminder to say fuck you, Crystal Alkifibrax. You killed the entire synchro mechanic because you exist. Anyway, these leads to our usual award, but because it's Yu-Gi-Oh theme, let's have them in Yu-Gi-Oh fashion, starting with
who's the most useless Yu-Gi-Oh character?
The Tristan Taylor Award for worst character.
Or Mokuba.
Again, I think Tristan is actually worse on that.
Yeah.
Flynn, you're one of the guests. Go ahead. Worst character to you of the movie. As a general reminder, because there's such little cast and little going on, repetitions are allowed.
Well, there was not really many big character moments in this movie, so I guess the Tristan Taylor Award has to go to Tristan Taylor. Great job, man! You've earned your award named after you, which is kind of like beating someone in checkers.
Alright, Jay, you're the other guest, go on.
I'm giving it to Wadapon because Jesus Christ, why are you still running that card in your deck?
Kind of makes you wonder why he didn't just use Karibo as the cutesy monster in defense, but I digress.
Well,
okay, Wadapon does show up in a few of the duels in the main series, and ever since
maybe this is a retrain.
It is an emergency 1-star card. I have no idea why he runs it. I'm baffled by its sincerity. He's got Karibo for the mascot thing. This is just a bad scapegoat.
Well, there's also the fact that Karibo also does damage negation, which means it has a use, like, genuinely.
It's just an emergency 1-star special summon. I don't like it. Get it out of your deck. Get the Karibo forces in there.
Alright, Jova, you're up.
I mean, I guess I'll be fair. This is one of those cases where I don't really consider the cast to be overall well, okay, no, Tristan, yeah, pretty much. Like, shoot, even Taya does more than Tristan. That said, if
Where
I'm
does that
trying,
fucking badass spin kick?
Yeah, we
I
didn't talk
guess-
about it. I guess someone will eventually pick it as the best scene. The characters actually do fight physically, the mummies. As Little Cream put it gets surprisingly violent.
They
Yes.
fucking box those guys.
Okay, to keep from just repeating on the Tristan thing, I guess Mokuba, and mind you, not even to say that I dislike Mokuba, it's just that,
Mokuba
I
does
guess,
nothing in this movie. Like,
Yeah.
even worse. Sure, I guess we should be thankful he doesn't get to be, in distress, like in other story arcs, but come the fuck on.
the most Mokuba does is pick up Yugi and start the dual battle system, because this is before GX where the dual discs could just do absolutely everything anywhere, essentially. But yeah, no, like, to Tristan's credit, even he technically got to do more than Mokuba when he helped beat up the mummies to help Yugi use the knife. Like, Mokuba, I like you, but you did pretty much nothing in this movie.
Dej?
Anyway, Dej.
There's a part of me that wants to say Pegasus because, like, why didn't you just look inside your deck before agreeing to this with Kaiba?
Admittedly, Pegasus didn't really have a reason to assume that somebody added a
No,
card
but he
to
had
his
a
deck.
dream. Like, he had a dream
And as
earlier.
Flynn
Like, somebody-
put it, his room is pretty much open. Anyone can just barge in, even if it
Yeah,
wasn't
he
Ghost
again.
form.
Open window, one bed, drawer on the complete opposite side. You have to take a hike to your drawer, dude.
But guys, who ever heard of somebody adding a card to the deck instead of stealing it?
Considering this series, that's actually very common.
Alright, I guess that leaves me for this. Okay, again, since nobody mentioned it, it goes perfect. Anubis. Really just a lame villain. Even for the standards.
I
the
didn't
anime.
want to use him because I knew you were gonna go for him. He sucks so. What was his plan?
Is this
I was
He
stupid?
was gonna
Dude.
beat the Pharaoh and he was gonna destroy
Look,
city.
and also, as I said, I don't have much sympathy for a person that's supposed to be of, ultimate, phenomenal cosmic powers, but your entire game plan can be popped with an MST. I'm sorry. At the very least, the leaders of the Orichalcos, cult, they had their ways to back up their words. So
When it comes to Anubis, he's fine for me. Yes, he's a bit generic, but he's like your typical big bad guy. I will admit, though, that his motivation seemed to pretty much just be, I want to destroy the world. Because, like, it's not even as revenge against
that's
the
the thing.
Pharaoh,
That's
since the Pharaoh
literally his
stopped
job.
him.
He basically believes that to be his, divine right. Basically, he's the person of destruction. Like he said,
Is that a
it's elaborated better in the Japanese version, but it was actually mentioned also in the original version, just as a passing thought.
It's just like Anubis is supposed to be one of the Egyptian gods, lore-wise.
Except
so,
in this case, again, that he's just a random sorcerer. The 4Kids version bothered to mention he was someone who tried to battle the pharaoh and lost and got sealed, while in the Japanese version it's kept more vague, but it's still basically that. It's just a human with some powers.
but I don't know. It's just like Anubis. Like if you look into Egyptian lore and whatnot, Anubis is cool. Why would you do that? Why is he so lame in this?
If anything,
Well,
it's
sadly,
not,
this isn't a Rick Riordan story, so we
Uh,
can't
uh,
have competently written gods.
also, as Jova
Hey,
said,
someone else who's seen that series go on to.
as Jova said, Anubis is supposed to be more of a neutral figure. If anything, one of the evil deities they could have used from the Egyptian mythos would be Set instead. Why didn't they use him?
It's
I
funny
think-
because, ironically, Set seems to be someone. Well, actually, no. To be fair, most adaptations keep him as the villain.
Anyway,
Granted, I think a lot of people wouldn't have been able to. Maybe the people in 4Kids weren't going to be able to take seriously the idea that, due to at the time translations, the main bad guy and a king of the underworld being just named Seth.
yeah, the next one is the Kaiba Award, aka the best character in the movie.
Okay, that has to go
No
to Kaiba.
bias found whatsoever.
Absolutely,
in that
but
sentence.
Flynn, you first.
Well, it's the Kaiba Award, and I guess I have to continue the bit, is what I would say if I was stupid. Best character in this movie is still Joey Wheeler, undefeated. Never fails.
Whatever makes you
choice.
sleep well at night. Jay.
You know what? I'm playing
I
that
never sleep
Yugioh
at night.
friendship with Flynn here. You're shaking my hand, because, Joey Wheeler.
Yeah, dab me up.
I
Dab me
don't
up
care
on
if I'm
that.
biased. Dab me up.
Okay,
Jova.
Dej, are you going to also add to?
Well, you
Oh,
first,
me.
Jova.
Man, I'm tempted to complete the bit, but Yugi. I mean, he just has that coolness factor. Maybe I'd say Kaiba, but sorry,
Wait,
Kaiba,
which
you
Yugi?
finished.
Yeah, which Yugi?
Yugi Muto.
Yes.
Remember, the pharaoh is Yami instead.
He's
Oh.
a Tem.
Well, at this
okay,
point,
okay.
he doesn't know yet.
Okay, if I were cheeky, I'd say both, but if I have to pick one Yugi, I'll go with Yama Yugi, since, as usual, at least up until that certain moment of the anime, if you know, you know, Yami does a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to the dueling, which is, okay, admittedly a bit of a shame, since regular Yugi can actually duel, you just might not know it because, like, 90% of the duels are won by Yama Yugi. But I digress, like, you know, both Yugis if I can, Yami Yugi if I have to pick just one.
That's
Because I want to continue to the bit with Joey, but if Jova had said Joey, I would have gone with it. But well, I'll go with the one that saved the day. Blue Eyes Shiny.
God damn it! I was
Dragon.
going to pick that.
Yeah.
If I could choose
you
Waterfall
can.
for the worst, you can choose Shining
I mean,
Dragon
I
for the
will
best.
say to reinforce what Deji is saying. I will say this: they made sure to actually sell you on the fucking card. The real problem that they mentioned is the fact that you could not summon it, but otherwise, yeah, even with its effect back then, it really was a game changer.
I kind of wish that the real card did have the effect of being like a singularized nuke.
Well, keep in mind, Flynn, by that point, a lot of people have already, had a couple of strategies like, Chaos Yatagarazu, which, result in a couple of things banned. So, the OCG and TCG did not want it to make things too overpowered. Anyway, I guess that's your pick, Dodge.
Yep.
Okay, I guess I was going to pick that, but if not, well, I just rely on the namesake and pick Seto Kaiba. Technically speaking...
There we go.
Well, okay, to be fair, I wanted to try to avoid that, but Deji forced my hand, unfortunately. Much like with Kaiba, with one of his cards that cuts his hand later on. But the thing is that, it's kind of a point. If he hadn't, if Anubis hadn't stepped in, he would have still won at the end of the day. So, he was actually that close to win. Sure, the bitchiness is still there in the end instead of actually, trying to be a bit nice, unlike in the Japanese version. But hey, again, it's the kind of a Starscream effect, as I like to call a character that is so fucking stupid in their action that he basically goes all around and comes back being awesome as a result, But anyway, that's kind of it. So next award is worst scene. Flynn.
I can't really think of a bad scene in this movie.
I can think of a couple, but go on.
Alright, then why don't you go first? Come on.
Alright, well, simply put, a phrase at the very beginning during the narration that it sounds so stupid that I literally cringed as if I was eating a lemon. As talking about, Anubis being sealed away, the narrator goes like, but not even eternity can last forever. Someone was paid to write that. Anyway, that's my example, Flynn. I think you can do better.
Oh, really? But if I had to pick a scene, I think like the whole preamble with them just fucking trying to run away from all those people could have been just removed.
Yeah, because it goes nowhere.
You could have removed that entire C plot and literally just had them be like, Yugi and his friends are going to a museum for today because Yugi wants to learn today.
It was probably an occasion to have Joy duel before, having an excuse for Joy to duel, but it's still... It's met the point because we didn't mention in the recap, the entire reason why Joy and Tristan managed to want to hold off is for Yugi and Tear to get away, but for some reason that escaped me, they basically go around the entire area, and they basically...
I was about to say that was the worst scene for me, but okay.
That was the one I was going to pick too. Specifically
It's like what? Okay, so Jova and I can just go and say,
yeah.
why did you come back?
Yeah, they peered around the corner. It's like, you made Joey's work pointless.
Makes me wonder which of them was the idea. Yugi, Taya, both.
Okay. I'm gonna say Taya.
Let's be real.
since, you know,
Yugi
the
can be
friends-
stupid without the pharaoh with him, so it was probably his.
Again, if anything, it takes this and the Waking the Dragon arc in order to try to, making him a bit more ready when Bakura shows up.
But yeah, no, seriously.
It does.
It could be either Yugi or Taya. Yugi, not always the brightest. Taya, you know how she is with the friends and all that.
Yeah, they
She's the
even make
heart of the party, but,
the whole parallel to the smiley that they draw for each of their hands. They made it even into a fucking card. Jay, you're missing.
Beautiful.
Gone.
Before I get to that, I will say, yeah, Dub Yugi sometimes isn't always the brightest, but I will always have like a soft spot for him on account of just him being clever enough to screw with the Pharaoh at times. Inviting Teo out on a date and then swapping with Attempt just so that the two of them can go out and have fun. That's such clever little gremlin behavior. But for the actual award, very early on in the scene where the archaeologists are discovering Anubis, linking that to the completion of the Millennium Puzzle just kind of feels contrived, and it also gives Yugi a kill, or a set of kills for wanting to have a friend. It's just very much not necessary. You could have easily just had it set that a time limit on the Anubis's.
Especially because it takes some time for Anubis to actually show up for no real adequate reason afterward.
Yeah,
It feels like that scene was
contrived.
It feels like that scene was added just so Anubis could go, yes, it's thanks to you, Yuki, that I am free, basically.
And even though he doesn't fucking do it.
It's just an 11th hour gotcha that they set up and then just kind of remembered at the end of everything. They're like, oh, right, this is a thing that we can use to blame Yugi for something. Throw it in there. It's poorly considered, and go ahead.
I want to put it like this. Even if I find the movie overall good, it does feel very much like the counterpart to the first Pokemon movie. It's definitely a movie made more for the veterans of the series than newcomers, but it has all those tricks in the book to basically suck in newcomers with it, making it seem like, oh, it's the biggest plot they've ever had to face, and oh god, it's truly personal for the heroes. Like, that is my legit theory on why they threw that in, to make it seem super duper personal. The punishment of Yugi's ultimate mistake by solving the puzzle, that he has to solve himself finally.
That leaves best scene. Flynn.
Which I think we can all agree
Gone.
was the scene where they fought the mummies. That was hilarious and it was great.
I mean, yeah, even without the quipping, it's just, the physical comedy from it just works.
And hey, they actually do get to show off the true power of friendship with these hands.
And Kix, remember, Tristan gets stuck, his foot stuck in a mummy.
Yeah. Thankfully, the guts are just sand now.
So there are
Although
dramas.
I think the idea is that they've decayed so much that they're basically just bones and ash.
Not to mention, remember, they're just representation of Anubis' power, because when the gemstone gets broken, they just disappear.
Although they do later come out to fuel the double-headed Sphinx, so they're apparently souls of the damned.
I guess, possibly
like
Anubis
you do.
servants. So, okay, is there anyone want to raise an objection, or is that the scene we all agreed upon?
Actually, I've got an unorthodox
Jay?
one.
Go on.
Yep.
Yeah.
I brought it up a little bit ago because of the animation area, but I actually really did like the scene of Anubis coming back after the duel was over and throwing cards at him. I'll get more into it for my final thoughts, but when that came around, it just kind of brought one of those
The original
age-old
English-
smiles to my face.
The original English version also wants him to be super funny by him saying, "It's not more time to do, but to die."
Die!
Yeah.
it's
That
so-
line actually made me fucking chuckle.
It's so
Yeah.
risque, because children's cartoons do not say the word die that often.
I just love the idea of it is time to die.
So
Dej?
when Kaibo saw his blue eyes playing, and you're not me.
Yes!
Like,
It's glorious!
That is an equally funny scene.
As I made a note, the Japanese version basically just puts on auto the playlist of the typical tracks that the anime already used. And just has a new vocal, it's still in English, but for the credits, just for the credits. When Kaba uses the jet instead of You're Not Me, it has one of the themes from the anime that, as I put in my notes, sounds something like a Dr. Robotnik / Eggman theme from the Dreamcast era of Sonic. That's so
I gotta
fucking
say,
weird.
Okay. I'll give 4Kids this also. The original soundtracks they made for their Yu-Gi-Oh dubs are actually pretty great. Again, kudos to them for that. Anyway, as for me and my favorite scene, I'm gonna go full traditional. That I love the final dual card play set where Yugi does an incredible set with first the Blue-Eyed Shining Dragon, then counters Anubis's Fused Sphinx with the Egyptian God cards, combining into this own weird mismatch where Slife for the Sky Dragon swirls around Obelisk's arm, Winged Dragon of Ra just decides to become a phoenix all of a sudden.
Well,
and
that's
then
one
they
of his
just
powers, remember.
True, yeah, but like literally becomes that flaming bit. Wraps around Obelisk's other arm, and then the monsters just basically beat down the Sphinx town style. It's beautiful.
Also,
and
yet again, Yami wins by basically stealing Kaiba's cards, just like in the virtual reality arc.
Beautiful. I'm sure Kaiba appreciates his blue-eyed shining
Son
dragon
of a
being
bitch.
used as that.
Once again,
But yeah,
Kaiba slams his hand on the desk.
like, I want to give the movie credit. I feel like as a Yu-Gi-Oh movie, it absolutely does its job in escalating Yu-Gi-Oh to like a movie base with the epic scenes you expect from Yu-Gi-Oh just bloomed up for the big screen. That does not mean it's a great movie overall, but I'll talk more about that in my final thoughts.
Speaking of which,
are
that's
we
where
about
we
ready
are.
to go to?
Final thoughts and score. 0.5s are allowed, but otherwise out of 10s. Flynn.
7. Yu-Gi-Oh! The movie is a decent, fun ride from beginning to end. While the dub has its problems and the plot does have a lot of dumb moments, I feel like it carries itself in the fact that the duels are portrayed really well, and the characters, as always with Yu-Gi-Oh! Series 1, are just fun time all around.
Alright,
then.
Jay, you're up.
Bringing back up the point of the little animation error, if this movie caught me at a different point in time, I probably would have given it a 6 or a 7 for being kind out of it, because there's still a lot of points that I've got issues with when it comes to the movie, including the early on scene and just how Anubis is in general. But at this point in time, my friends and I have gone through the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and after a mass amount of adventures going from intriguing to straight tiring, especially for later seasons in GX and 5Ds, coming back to the original series and coming across this one just put a damn smile on my face. When things were a lot simpler and a lot more fun, this movie achieves that of being just a dumb, fun ride in and out. You want a fantastic Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie, you can go to the Dark Side of Dimensions. If you want a Yu-Gi-Oh! Movie that's just fun and runs with it, come to this one. This one's getting an 8 and an 8.5 for just a little bit of a smile on my face.
Alright, 8.5. Java.
Okay, if I were to personally rate this with how much fun I had coming back to this movie, I'd give it a 10 out of 10 with a smile on my face. But as tempting as that is, we do have a whole ranking system going on between all these movies. And I do want to combine the fun I have with it while trying to still be properly critical. When this movie first came out, critics hated it because it wasn't newcomer friendly, and some people might not be able to understand what's going on. I don't think that's particularly fair. Like, that was the same critique that a lot of critics threw to the Pokemon movie, but I feel like, first and foremost, movies should be for the fans. Yes, that's not always going to get the big bucks, but it does show a level of integrity which it feels does wonders for it. Now, that being said, I feel like if you know the basic card game, you'll be fine with this, essentially. So, and I'd say story-wise, all you need to know is that Kaiba's really sore about all the times he's lost, essentially. And all these other past guys that Yugi's also managed to defeat are in on the mission too, essentially, including Pegasus. It's not perfect. There are some gaps of logic, but I will say that the dub is probably in one of the best spots it would be for the original series. Helps that this was made in English on the get-go first, so they were actually able to come up with the quips all on their own here and there. It's a very, very good and fun romp. That being said, I can't deny Anubis, while I do like his design, is a bit of a weak villain in that we don't go much to him aside from he wants to destroy the world because that's apparently his right or some jazz like that. I do wish we could have seen more of him in human form before he goes all monster on us,
All
essentially.
jackally.
Yeah.
Because, like, I understand your point, because, like, my big thing that I agree with you on this is Anubis is kind of just enough. He's the generico big movie villain that these things have. Because I've noticed sometimes even Pokemon villains, even Pokemon movie villains kind of fall into a very similar thing to Anubis.
Yes, we have witnessed.
Look.
Well, yeah, you guys are on the Silver Screen Conference. That's what I'm more so bringing up.
Oh yes. And this is why I say that this feels like, in a lot of ways, the perfect counterpart to the first Pokemon movie. Now, mind you, I do find Anubis to have actually a pretty cool design. I just wish we could have gotten more of him, essentially. Like, I get it. They wanted to bring him at just the right moment where it's like, oh my god, this major twist near the end. I do feel like we could have had more of him, essentially. Now, mind you, for the bits he is on screen, I actually do enjoy him.
I like his
and
voice.
The Sphinx. Yeah, and I do dig the Sphinx archetype as well, even if gameplay-wise it's not the best. But hey, for the sake of this movie, they're hype, essentially.
Gameplay-wise, Sphinxes actually haven't received support since this movie, I think.
Again, we just printed them for the sake of, being tied to that, but they never bothered to elaborate.
So what you're saying is, if I have a copy of Sphinx, a Blue-Eyed Shining Dragon that I got from the movie theater, I could sell it for a pretty penny on eBay.
What Flynn means is that they did not receive support to be properly playable in the actual game.
Basically, more so what I mean is they're playable. You can get them out. You can do things. It's just
at your locals.
They are going to fold at even I think there are GX archetypes that would shut down Sphinx.
Pretty much.
I'm so happy to be an Ice Barrier player in the year 2025.
Dude, Ice Barrier wouldn't just shut that shit down. They wouldn't even get started.
Specifically, the free banish from Trishula at the very least.
And that's the thing. I feel like, as a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, this movie speaks to me well. Could it have been better? Of course. Yes, it could have been. It's 4Kids we're talking about. But, again, I'm giving 4Kids credit where credit is due. This was around a time where they did actually put integrity into their work instead of, where things would go by the time of One Piece and they would rightfully die for that. But no, this was at a time where I can still believe that they were coming from a place of love. I love the quips in this movie. It gives it a good sense of life and keeps it from being generic, essentially. The music that they made for it is also pretty great, too, including even the original songs. It wears its heart on its sleeve, and it's a great precursor for GX to the point where, yeah, there's no beating around the bush. Cards are pretty much one of the major world powers by the point of GX. It's that big. This is goofy, silly, earnest, but still an awesome time. That said, I do agree that it could have been better. But, okay, as for a movie of newcomers, not the best. But for a movie for Yu-Gi-Oh fans, I'd say it's pretty much a delight. Therefore, I am going to give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Alright, Dedge.
Oh, that's higher than me.
So, I'm gonna be honest. Watching this in English, this movie is boring as shit. It just feels like jokes, gags, and it's like, hey, we have a card game, and a good chunk of the movie is about the duel between Yugi and Kaiba, and the others are set to the Final Fantasy VII realm. The dimension thing.
Yeah, it's supposed to be more based around an MC Escher painting, but I can understand.
It's very Escher.
But I can understand why you make the comparison to the Temple of the Ancients.
Yeah. It's just a very underwhelming movie. But you know what? I still rather watch this than Bond Beyond on Time. Holy shit!
Well, Bonds Beyond Time is just sort of a crossover movie for the sake of having one, but that's not today's subject, so I don't want to get too deep.
For me.
It'll probably get its time eventually.
However, the Japanese version does elevate it a bit with like what Teo says, like, okay, they expanded upon things. But for the most part, I'm just gonna give this a 6.
Okay, that leaves me.
That's still some pretty strong scores, though.
I mean, yeah, because like if I was just if I didn't see the Japanese version, this would have gotten a 5.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, that leaves me. I'm pretty much with the Dej on this. Well, not completely, because out of all of the Yu-Gi-Oh! OVAs, this is the one that I will watch the least out of. I'll take even Bonds Beyond Time just for the crossover hype factor. And honestly, Paradox is a much better villain than Anubis. I'm sorry.
This is a really fun villain, and I'm totally not saying that because I'm not saying that just because I ran Malefics back in high school.
Why did you run Malefics?
It was a fun gimmick.
It's another archetype that gets popped by MST. Why would you do that?
Ew! Can't we all just agree that pendulums suck?
Well,
Actually,
yeah.
no, pendulums are high tier.
No, they can still suck. Yuma and all of his talks about Egao, aka his Miles, can go fuck himself. Him and his alternate dimension clones. Anyway.
Yuma? From Zexel?
No, from Arc V.
Then that's Yuya.
Whatever. My point still stands. Outside of that, I still agree with Deji that the movie in its original format is a confusing mess and argue still not that entertaining, outside of the occasional hee-hee moments from Kaiba, and that's just more like out of, mild amusement that they actually did that more than, a genuine joke that fits the plot. If I had to consider the Japanese version, I would have given it a 6.5, believe it or not, because, like Deji also said, it elevates the product, properly actually, and gives it a more coherent way and of explaining things, and the pacing is actually more enjoyable, despite the longer runtime, by the way. Those 30 minutes are not something that you will really feel more, because of what I just said, but they are technically almost a quarter of an hour more than the actual runtime. For an extended cut, that is not Lord of the Rings, obviously, it still is, quite relatively lengthy for addition purposes, but the movie makes sure that you don't particularly notice until you actually catch your eye by looking at both versions, like, that's what it meant. And again, it does a good job integrating that. The problem is that if I had to understand correctly, that's not the original intent. Sure, it puts it on more the parallel with what the actual manga and the anime were doing properly in Japan, so it's more of a return to form. But it's exactly the point that I know most of the time, against when America does it, and instead in this case, it's a case where Japan does it. I think it's more of a case where the movie, yes, could have been potentially salvageable, but it should have been at the rhythm of the actual original creators, in this case, the two English writers. I don't think we mentioned their names, but they're credited on Wikipedia if you can find them. Which is basically the same that I say also for all the other example, which is also a good point for this movie and for kids. Again, it's not on the bad levels of Saban as we established in Digimon the movie. Fuck that. That was an experience, but it's still a prime example of everything that I do not like about how America views Japanese animation, at least at the time. Things got better in recent years at the very least, but at least back then. And put it simply, lack of respect begets lack of respect. So in this case, I'm gonna give it a 5, and I'm relatively general because I was considering a 4.5, but just because, I do believe it's still a mid product, at worst. I've seen far worse adaptation, I've seen worse, commissioned things, and I've seen far worse, anime OVAs in general. Again, like the Digimon movie work that Saban did, for example.
I said Saban needs to go to jail.
Which does remind me that we didn't mention, but the Digimon movie did got re-released thanks to Discotheque, which contains both versions now, the weird as fuck American version from Saban, and thankfully a properly translated version of our war game. I don't know if Hurricane Touchdown is included in that, but at the very least our war game is. Sadly, no Angela Anaconda short, but I'm pretty sure we will be able to cope with that. Anyway, I gave it a 5. That would mean the total score is 34. And here's your twist, audience. Me and Edge behind the scenes were talking and realized, man, all this April Fool's video tends to be relatively inconsistent from our regular schedule because people go, up and away. So as a result, we decided to literally yoink away just the April Fool's movies, which with this one count 4, and made a special ranking based on the votes just for this one, canonizing every single vote, including the guest, or in the case of the first 2 movies that we did, Pedro's votes, since, for the time being he's not voting anymore. Meaning that we have now 4 movies for this ranking that will not be counted for the regular Pokemon OVAs. Last place, we have Digimon the movie with 9 votes. Third place, we have Pokemon Live with 24 votes.
I wish I was there. I'm sorry I couldn't make it.
Leaves a surprise for you, don't worry. Second place, we have this movie, The Pyramid of Light, with 34 points. And first place, we have Yokai Watch the movie with 36 points instead.
Hey, wow.
Yeah, it's more of a case where the score was average for that one, but more evenly distributed. But it might be subject to change according to what Shiro told us at the very least. So that leaves us wondering where to go next.
After destroying the opponent's life points due to believing in the heart of the cards, it's time to go back to the past, in order to reshape the history of a country against the evil Gig Zombie. Wait, what?
Yes.
All from the viewpoints of a bunch of children and a blue robotic cat. Tune in next time for Doraemon, Nobita and the Birth of Japan. Both versions.
Oh dear lord.
You guys are doing Doraemon?
I guess.